Good morning, Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Thursday, the 11th of June, 2020. This week I've been looking at weather, especially as it relates to the story of the New Testament. When we read novels, and if you probably have your favorite authors as I do, weather appears in there generally for one of two reasons. Some authors like to extend the book, like to embellish the story, so they'll add a lot of details about character, to try to give you a picture of the person, or they'll add details to the setting, what things look like, what the weather's doing, in order to just kind of give you a feeling that you're there. The other thing is weather may actually be a major factor. I like John Sanford, who writes books about these detectives that work in Minnesota, and the weather is definitely a factor in those stories because oftentimes there will be season changes. In the winter there will be heavy snowfall, ice on the rivers, and then in the spring things will melt and all of a sudden evidence is uncovered of a crime that occurred in late fall. If you're a John Sanford fan, you know what I mean. Today I'm looking at chapter 8 of Luke, and it's a familiar story to us. While they were sailing on the Sea of Galilee, Jesus fell asleep. A windstorm swept down on the lake and the boat was filling with water. And they were in danger. They went to Jesus and woke him up, shouting, "Master, Master, we're perishing." And he woke up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and they ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where's your faith?" They were afraid and amazed and said to one another, "Who then is this that he even commands the wind and the water, and they obey him?" The gospel of our Lord. It's a story about faith, but the weather is a necessary detail to produce the situation that causes their faith to be tested. And I think weather tests our faith, and it certainly tests our mettle. We deal with weather. We live in an agricultural area where weather is a major factor in our stories and in our lives. Those who live in urban areas may see the weather as something that they have to face on their commute, going to or from work. Maybe nice weather. It's hot, the windows are down, or the air conditioning's on. Remember the old times when the cars would overheat going up a hill because of the air conditioning, and we would have to then roll all the windows down and actually turn the heater on to pull heat off of the engine so that the radiator would cool off. Those good old days. Yeah, I remember riding as a 6-year-old from Boise to Seattle for the 1962 World's Fair with my brother and sister and my very tall older cousin Gary, all 6 of us cramped into a car going up that Milton Freewater grade and having to stop to let the radiator cool down because it was hot that July. And it may be rain or snow or sleet. We have fog. How many times every winter are the freeways shut down between Tri-Cities and Yakima for a few hours because there have been multi-car pileups due to black ice or people not driving with common sense in the fog or sleet. Rain can come down so hard the visibility can just drop to literally zero. And they're short-lived, but nonetheless a lot of damage can happen in a short time because of the weather. At the same time, though, people who don't work outside in the weather or don't rely on the weather to produce the conditions needed for fertile farmland and for crops to grow and not be damaged by the weather, you get into your office or you work from home, or during COVID you're quarantining at home. The weather is just kind of a backstory. It's one of those details. It's, well, yeah, watch Tim Adams on the weather report. I love Tim. He's a good friend, and so I will faithfully watch him until he's going to be fully retired and we won't get to see him anymore. But he's a meteorologist. He had his 20 years in as a Master Chief in the Navy. He's an all-around good guy. But he says, Ron, when you look at the weather reports, what we're doing is looking over the next 5 days, and then we're seeing what the computer tells us, and the computer is using history, and it's doing its best to tell us what's going to happen. Day 6, we're guessing. The computer's doing the work on day 6. But day 1, day 2, yeah, I'm pretty good. He says, just don't ever ask me, well, did I get it right for the last 5 days? The reason weather people get to keep their job, because we're always looking forward or present. We're saying very little about what the weather did yesterday unless it caused a lot of damage and media story. This is a story in the Bible where the weather is absolutely necessary. The wind is causing that boat to take on water. The waves are coming over the gunnels, and that's going down in, and well, I guess they don't have a bilge pump or a bucket or something. I'm guessing back then they had a way of clearing out the water in the boat with a bucket, but it was coming in too fast. And for some reason, they thought Jesus should be concerned. How could he sleep through this? At least he can get a bucket and help bail. And instead, Jesus says, all right, be calm. And they're amazed. And he says, where is your faith? Well, what faith? Why wouldn't you panic if you're in a boat in the middle of a large lake and there's water coming in and the wind is causing that boat to list hard to port or hard to starboard, and the more water in it, the harder it is, and you can't put up much sail because the rain is coming and the wind is so fast that it's just out of control conditions. Not what you'd call great sailing. And this is a fishing boat, so the sail would have been a fairly simple one. Going out, coming back. It's not a pleasure craft. It's a working boat. Well, the weather is part of our lives. Like someone says, if you don't like the weather, move. Or if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, as we would say in Colorado on that Front Range. The weather is unsettled this week. We are supposed to get high winds tomorrow night. It's raining out there today, and it's June. And wind and rain aren't really good during cherry harvest, and the cherries are on right now. But I mean, as one of the people said in our men's group, well, mostly the cherries are gone because we got frost at just the wrong time, so the rain can't do any more damage than was already done. Weather, we take it for granted most of the time, or most of us do, unless we work out in it or we're farming. But give a thought, give a prayer for those who work in the weather. Today I chose to wear one of my Thrivent shirts. We have lots of these. Anyone wants a free t-shirt, they're so comfortable. But mostly because of the slogan on it, live generously. I wanted to put a reminder in there that the reason we're able to give away food is because we do have adequate farmland. We do have farmers who are working hard, who didn't isolate, who couldn't afford to. We have farm workers who are out there. And we have people getting that food where it needs to be, to the markets. God bless all the people whose hands are involved in our food supply and in the food distribution chain. And especially, though, those who get up because the frost warning said, oop, I've got to turn on the wind machine and get some water on those trees, or I've got to start up those smelly old diesel smudge pots. I remember my grandparents were farmers, and boy, there's no such thing as a guaranteed night's sleep for farmers. And if your life is on the sea and you're in a small boat, I'm guessing it's very much weather dependent. That weather isn't something you wait and look at on the 10 o'clock news. Weather is something you are constantly aware of because it can affect your life. And this is one of the places in the New Testament where the weather was threatening the lives of the disciples. And Jesus wasn't threatened by the weather at all because it didn't have the ability to cause him harm or to stop him from going on his mission toward Jerusalem, where he would die for the sins of the world. It was just a little thing, a little irritation. So he took the irritation away. Little thing for him, great thing for us. We do pray for good weather. Do we expect God to hear us? After all, Jesus said, it rains on the just and the unjust alike, as I talked about on Monday. Yeah, we should pray for weather, not because we expect God to change the weather for us here while leaving it different for someone who's half a mile away, although we do see weather very localized. These scattered showers can miss one part of town and put hail on another part of town, and wind here and rain there. It's very strange. Nonetheless, praying is how we tell God what's on our hearts and on our minds. And we ask God to give us the strength to work with the weather so that we can have food, and so that because we have enough food, we also have enough food to give away, food so that we can live generously. Thanks. See you tomorrow.